instruments. All right, let's begin. So the first thing you're going to see here is empathy. Empathy is basically us as the musician, as the listener, as an audience member, is putting ourselves into the shoes of those who are experiencing jazz. Now, although not absolutely necessary, learning about the fundamental rules and techniques of jazz can deepen one's understanding and appreciation of the art. By understanding these rules, we are putting ourselves into the shoes of those who play jazz. So here we have a photo. It is Bop City. This is in New York. Jazz was played at places like this, these small clubs. Sometimes the clubs were fairly large. Now, timbre. Now, the word timbre itself comes from the Greek, tympanon, where we get our modern day word timpani from, which means drum. Tympanon in Greek means drum. But timbre is actually a French word, timbre. That's why we actually say timbre instead of timbre, like it's phonetically spelled. So we say it in the French way of timbre. Okay, and now timbre it's a weird concept. It simply means the quality of the sound. So when we're thinking about the quality of the sound, we want to think of timbre in this example. So think about this. You're attending a crowded party and trying to single out or concentrate on a single person's voice in an effort to sustain conversation with learning to listen for timbre and picking out individual instruments in a recording. Think of it as being at a crowded party, and what you're trying to do is single out one person talking. And so in order to appreciate timbre in jazz music, right, it's the ability to be able to pinpoint specific instruments and pinpoint the quality of the sound coming out of those specific instruments. Think about it in this way as well. Your immediate ability to distinguish your family members' voices from one another in a darkened room. The quality of your family members' voices is the timbre. You can recognize who's speaking based on the tone quality or the color of the person speaking. All right. Let's keep moving on here. So here we have a small ensemble. We have it would be considered most likely a smaller type of big band. Can anybody guess who the trumpet player is? Okay, let me give you a hint. Very famous musician. No guesses? All right, I'll give it to you. It is, in fact, Louis Armstrong, right? He's warming up on his trumpet while trombonist Tommy Dorsey and saxophonist Bud Freeman are watching him warm up. Louis Armstrong, a very famous trumpet player at this time. So, the ensemble, right? When we say ensemble, we say the group, the band, the people performing. And what they're made up of is many different types of instruments. So, for example, the ensemble is actually made up of wind instruments. So we consider these horns, right? Instruments that need wind to create that sound. Okay, within wind instruments, we've got a number of different types of instruments, such as brass instruments, which use mutes to change the timbre, the quality of their sound, okay, to either dampen it or create a muted type sound, right? Not the full-on sound that we would normally get without something. By the way, these mutes go directly into the bell of a trumpet, a trombone. I've seen tuba mutes, saxophone mutes. It just mutes the sound. The quality of the sound changes. The timbre of the sound changes. And as you can see down here, on the far right, we have a plunger mute, literally a toilet plunger. I have seen jazz musicians use toilet plungers as mutes on their instruments, as a simple mute. It's pretty awesome. So the other instruments of our ensembles, like we said, we have brass instruments. Okay, we have reeded instruments like the saxophone, the clarinet. Even in modern day big band jazz, that you would find at the Lincoln Center, you will find some saxophone players even playing the bass clarinet, which is a reeded instrument as well. All right, let's keep moving on here. So in this photo, during the swing era, Art Shaw, or Artie Shaw, he rivaled Benny Goodman. They both played the clarinet. For popularity, right? They both were trying to get out there in terms of their popularity. So in this photo, you see Shaw. He leads one of the few integrated small groups. This is in 1945. The group, it's a very small group. We have Dodo Marmarosa on piano, Roy Eldridge on trumpet, Benny Shaw on clarinet, or Art Shaw, on clarinet. We have Barney Kessel on guitar and Morris Raymond on bass. Here we have New Orleans virtuoso, Sidney Bechet, who's right in the middle of this photo. He was originally trained on clarinet, moved over to the soprano saxophone, which is a straight instrument that contrasts visually with the alto saxophone and the tenor saxophone. So the other two saxophones have the bells. The instruments are curved up in terms of the bells, whereas the soprano saxophone looks very similar to a clarinet and is just straight down. There's no curve in it at all. It's just a brass version of a clarinet. So here now we have one of the most important sections of our ensembles is the rhythm section. Now, in early jazz, rhythm sections typically were meant simply to keep time, just to keep time, right? Very, very straightforward, right? Dun 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 dun. Right, very straightforward, meant to keep time. As jazz evolved through time, the rhythm section became more and more important and wasn't just in the background keeping time. They, a lot of the time, they were the colorful aspect to the main tunes of the song. They would push and drive the soloist. They would keep things moving, right? Keep the energy of the group up, keep the energy of the music up, and to really push those people who are playing to really maximize their talents. So here we actually have the All-American rhythm section of the Count Basie Band. Okay, it was very light rhythm section, but exceptionally powerful. Okay, the rest of the band crowded into a very tiny bandstand at New York's famous door in 1938. We have a whole slew of variety of different instruments here. But we have Count Basie on the piano himself. As well, you have to take a look at this photo, right? In the famous door in New York, that's what it's called, is the famous door. It's a very small studio. very small stage, and you can tell, right, these musicians are truly jam-packed. And you can see directly in the middle, we have a soloist on the trumpet, okay? And you can see directly in the trumpet's bell is one of those mutes to mute the sound, to change the timbre, to change the quality, to change the color, the tone of the sound itself. So we get bass instruments, percussion instruments, right? Bass, percussion, piano, these are all considered the accompaniment. In early jazz, they were in the background of the sound, right? Keep things moving, keep the chord progressions going. And sometimes they would have solos, but a lot of the time they would just be provided as kind of the accompaniment, that driving force to keep the tempo, to keep the chord structure, so that the other ensemble members, the wind section and the horns, really could keep it going. Excuse me. All right, let's keep moving. So we have our standard drum kit. Right, your standard drum kit includes a ride cymbal, the large tom, which gives you that deeper sound, a smaller tom. In some jazz ensembles, you'll see actually 3 toms, a small, a medium, and a large tom to give a range of sound out of the kit. You have a bass drum, which is hit by a kick pedal with 1 foot. We have a snare drum, we have a hi-hat cymbal, okay, and we have a crash cymbal to add some color. Now the drum kit, the percussionists themselves would use different types of implements. We have different types of mallets, which could be yarn mallets, very soft mallets to give you one type of sound. Harder mallets, which are made of wood or plastic, to give you a more sharper sound. We have brushes to give you this very wash type sound. And we have your standard drum sticks, which are made of various types of woods. Now, polyrhythm, when we talk about polyrhythm, poly meaning many, rhythm meaning the way things are organized, the way beats are organized, right? Many different rhythms going on at the same time. There was this shift from polyrhythm. From polyrhythm, okay, to swing. Where we get more of a groove type sound, right? So polyrhythm, right, this very European style, it evolved from the European style with some African and African-derived music put into there with all these cool different rhythms playing at the same time with one general beat. But the idea of syncopation comes in. Right, the idea of syncopation, where we're not playing directly on the beat anymore. We get these offbeat syncopated rhythms to give that pulse, that groove, that kind of fun and more exciting experience for the listener and the player itself. So we have here Jack DeJohnette, okay. Every drummer begins with a basic drum set, but finds a way to alter the sound to suit his or her particular personality. There are drummers out there who have very, very small kits, and they like it that way. There are drummers out there like Neil Peart who have giant drum sets with drums all circling all around him. But that's what he liked. That's what he wanted. That's how he played. That's his personality. That's his style of playing. If you didn't know Neil Peart, he's from the band Rush, who actually recently passed away. So, syncopation. We have jazz soloists that add the variable layers of rhythm, right, to give this more easier to dance to a tune, right? You have strong beats on the downbeats. You have syncopation on the off of the beats, the offbeats. Accents from the percussion section, from the accompaniment section, would occur on beats 2 and 4 instead of 1 and 3 in a 4-measure bar, to give this feel of a backbeat, to give this feel of a nice groove to the music. Here we have John Coltrane, one of the greatest saxophone players ever, who still influences saxophone players even to this day, myself included. He had a very short career, but he, like I said, he became the most influential tenor saxophonist of his generation. And I think you can argue that he is one of the most influential tenor saxophonists and overall jazz musicians even of today. The huge component to jazz, one of the foundations of jazz, the foundational elements of jazz, is this idea of swing. Without swing, we would not have the evolution of jazz. We would not have the jazz of today. We would not have rock and roll without the implementation, the starting of swing. Swing gives you this groove, right? It's a 4-beat rhythm with a backbeat, right? Remember, syncopation. Doom da doom da doom da doom da do ba do ba da ba boo da. Okay, swing is a type of groove that is very basic, but is fundamental to jazz. Melody and harmony, both very important things. Many jazz musicians understand that melody is key to becoming a successful jazz musician in the music industry. If you want to make money, you should need to make sure that your music has some form of melody so that people can hum a tune when they walk away from the music after listening to it once or twice. But melodies and harmonies come from knowing scales. Scales are consisted of 12 half steps called a chromatic scale. Right? If you look at a piano has white keys and black keys. If you go from every single key, white, black, black, white, white, black, and so on, all across the standard piano keyboard. Right? If you take a look, right? If you have white keys and you go to black keys, if you go white, black, white, black, white, white, black, white, black, and so on, right, you'll eventually hit 12 keys from C to C, and we call this a chromatic scale. But jazz musicians have to understand both chromatic scales, major scales, minor scales, different modes, which we'll talk about later, in order to improvise. Now, improvisation is where a musician will play on their own. They will make up music on the spot that is brand new, but using a specific scale. And most often, when jazz musicians first start out, or when you have new players coming into an ensemble or a band, a blues scale is your number one friend. If you know a blues scale, you can improvise with only 2 notes. If you know 2 notes of a blues scale in any of the keys, you can become a soloist, an improv musician using 2 notes. Harmony is when 2 notes come together and create a sound that is pleasing to the ear. There are many pop songs nowadays that use harmony, where you have one singer and another singer who sing the same line but at different pitches to create a very nice harmonious sound between the two. Now I'm just going to fly through these, but if you would like, read through them. The PowerPoint presentations are on Google Slides on our Google Classroom. Read through these to give yourself a better understanding, a deeper understanding of what, harmony and melody are all about. Texture refers to the way melody and harmony are balanced. If one is overpowering the other, we don't get a nice sound, and it is very obvious. Where you have a band, for example, like Ray Charles. Let's take Ray Charles, for example. He had a group of backup singers who would sing harmony behind his melodic line. If you don't know, Ray Charles is a very famous blind jazz musician who had a pretty rough life, lots of up and downs. And just so you know, he did not treat women very well, but his music is still very influential to today. And in my opinion, I truly believe that we need to pay more attention to his life and how he treated women and the people around him over his music. Sure, his music was very influential, but him as a person, we need to look more at that and try and balance the two. But that's for another day. So texture, right? We want to blend harmony and melody together. So in Ray Charles's group, if his backup singers who were singing harmony overpowered him as the melody singer, his tunes would not be recognizable. His tunes would not sound great. All we would get is the harmony, and we'd probably be cheering way more for the backup singers than we would for the main lead singer, that is Ray Charles, who is singing the melody. So there needs to be balance between harmony and melody. So here, the year before he released his landmark album, Kind of Blue, in 1959, on which the song So What is featured, Miles Davis took his new band on the road. This picture shows 5 of its 6 members at the Newport Jazz Festival in July of 1958. Now, by the way, the Newport Jazz Festival is still going on today. This year, not so much, because of everything that's happening in the world, but it is still existing. But you get Miles Davis on the trumpet. Very famous musician. His group is very small. And if we were to swing the camera around and take a picture of the drum kit, you would find that the drum kit itself is also very limited, very small, but that's the style. And if you take a look right beside Miles Davis, we have the very famous John Coltrane on the tenor saxophone. All right, let's keep moving on. So monophony or monophony is a melody that is performed by a single solo voice with no harmonic accompaniment, which sometimes happens in jazz where you have stop music, breaks, right? Where you have breaks, nobody else is playing, but one single musician. That's what we call monophony. Mono meaning one, phono meaning sound. Okay, polyphony, okay, where we have 2 or more simultaneous melodies of equal interest played at the same time. Sometimes polyphony can be considered as collective improvisation, where more than one person is soloing at the same time. Or when a whole section of instruments, say for example, in the horn section, specifically in the saxophones, you have all the saxophones, right? The alto, the tenor, and the bari sax all playing the same simultaneous melody at the same time of equal interest. That's polyphony, polyphony, many sounds. And that's it. All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget, check on Google Classroom and answer this week's discussion question. Adios for now.